On this episode of Getting to Hired, we speak with Wade Smith and some tactics for your success in your transition. Coming right up. Hi there, my name's Tony Morrow, and welcome to Getting to Hired, the show where we help you transition successfully into your new civilian career. Today, I am joined by Wade Smith. Now, Wade and I go back a little bit. I've known him from my days in the Navy, but Wade has been kind enough to join us today to talk about his successful transition from being a naval clearance diver to being a personal coach and a successful entrepreneur today. So, Wade, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Tony.
So, for those of us who perhaps are unfamiliar what a clearance diver is and what your background is, and this could be a very long story, but let's keep it short, just so that everybody kind of can keep pace with us here. But in like a 2-minute description, how would you describe your military experience leading to your transition into your civilian life?
Oh, that is a tough one in 2 minutes. It was about 25 years ago that I was in Croatia and finding myself in the Medak pocket, of all places. This little known battle that Canadians were in 1993. I was a young reservist in the Army, in the infantry. And quickly, from the infantry, I saw some combat engineers out there, and I thought, wow, that's like a pretty sweet gig. So when I got back to Canada and I went back to school, I decided, hey, I'm going to be a combat engineer. So I started that, became a combat diver quite quickly. Combat diver, blowing stuff up underwater, and it was just the best. So I thought, wow, what's better than actually being a clearance diver in the Navy? When I first saw these guys, I thought, wow, they're on first name basis for the most part, and they dress differently and they act differently, and they dive deep and they do all these crazy and awesome things, and they get to blow stuff up. And so I spent the last 16 years in that trade, and it was a great trade. But I always said to myself, when I get 20 years in, then I'm going to look at something new. I'm going to start my life over and begin something from a new place.
And so, as you were getting close to that, you came past 20 years and you were looking around, that's around the time I met you for the first time. I was fortunate enough to be on a clearance diving course where I met Wade. It's so interesting. We were talking about it just before the taping, and I'm sure many of you have the same experience. You look across the room and you see somebody, and they've got this aura of being hard. You don't want to talk to them. They've got attitude. And so when I looked across the room and I saw Wade, he was this stoic example of that. And I remember as I knew him a little bit longer over time, it kind of broke down a little bit. But Wade, your transition from this stoic, hard as nails kind of guy that I saw from across the room to the man you are today, professionally, that is, there was a journey and a process for that led to your transition and leaving the military and retiring. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, as you were saying that, I couldn't help but think of that guy from G.I. Jane that was stoic, right? And and that's the Hollywood image of it for sure. And so it makes me think back to, that was the person that I was told to be, or the person that I thought I needed to be. So through my transition was finding the person, my authentic self, the person that I could really be. Because that other stuff was, well, let's face it, there was a bit of a wall there. There was a shell, and it was more about protection. So, the aura might be there and it might be present, but no one else gets to really have a part of that or a piece of that.
Well, and I imagine that for those who are vets who are watching or active members, they probably come across many folks in the military who share elements, if not that entire aspect of personality. They have this hard image, external image of who they are and what they are, and you look at them and you're just like, wow, that guy's hard, or well, however you want to describe it. But I mean, you look at that person, and that's an idealized personification of a set of traits that are kind of promoted within the military, and especially in the clearance diving trade. And you exemplified that at that time. But like you say, there was this process of discovery where you were finding yourself, and I'm curious to share with everybody how that happened for you.
Sure. What you're referring to, I think, is the hard assery, and it serves you in the military. It works for you. It does, especially as a leader. There was a process where I discovered that it may not actually effectively work for me outside of the military. So my last couple of years that I was still serving, I was working on some big projects. One in particular was with the Defense Learning Network, and then another one was this great big nutrition project that was kind of a CF-wide thing. And I had my nose down, and I was just working hard, doing that thing that I knew to do, and it was just all automatic. So every day I just go back to work and just get that work done a little bit more. And one day there was my boss came to me. I think it was Walter DeBow, and he said, Smitty, I got somebody here to work with you, to help you out. And I thought, oh man, there's no way. Like, I can't babysit somebody. I don't have the time for that. I got too much work to do. and that was the first time that I met James Butler. Even though he was on the clearance diver course, he was a young kid, compared to me. I was in my 40s and he was in his early 20s. And I thought, oh, what am I going to do with this guy? So it only took about a week for us to really bond and start working together as a team. And that's where I was really inspired to start doing things a little bit differently. I had been on a path to get to that place, but I was still doing things very much alone. That was the way that I did things. It was easier for me to just do it instead of getting somebody else to help.
Mm-hmm.
And as I worked with James and we created these things, so we created new videos and how to train clearance divers and new cultures actually of how we would have the course run through. And oh man, it was amazing. And through all this stuff, this guy had gone from near death with a half a dozen tubes sticking out of his lungs to clear all the fluid out, on his deathbed, literally in the hospital. And then through divorce and through all these traumatic events, and through all of that, he was introduced to coaching by a mutual friend, and that was something else, to watch his transformation. It was inspiring. And it's funny, when we see somebody else capable of doing something, that one thing can be enough to inspire you to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not quite enough. So he stood by me and would give me some inspiration or motivation each day to start this coaching program for myself. And as I was looking at releasing from the military, and even though I had a job lined up, I still knew that I wanted to coach. I just didn't think that I'd be able to be an entrepreneur on my own. And honestly, at that point, I probably didn't want it that much. It just seemed like it was a big headache and hassle, and how am I going to get my paychecks and all that kind of stuff. So, so having that one person standing by, seeing me at my highest and greatest, that was just enough for me to be able to take that step. And like Brene Brown says, choose courage over comfort. And although I was comfortable with the paycheck and everything else, I knew in my heart that I wanted to do something different that was inspiring.
And so what you describe, that essentially that fear of trying to
Hmm.
do something new, like you said, there's security in the paycheck, the thing that you know, and this mentality and attitude that you had from before that was successful in the clearance diving world, which is where you were, spending your professional life, and then for you to take a leap, this risk to try something new, this coaching thing. I mean, what is that? Um, and I mean,
Yeah.
so it's interesting. Like when in your job as a clearance diver, that's clear cut, defined. You knew exactly what you're doing. I'm going in. I'm defusing that bomb. I'm going to go dive to this depth. I'm going to go swim this distance. Like there are metrics, measurable, defined aspects to that job. You know what you're doing. When
Hmm.
someone comes to you, when you're in that world and talks to you about coaching, what is this fluffy, cloudy thing? Coaching. What is that? Especially in the hard assery mindset that you were in, and then you started. Essentially, he started wearing you down, and you started coming around. But there's an emotional kind of an emotional transition you go through in that process, and you described that you started kind of making this breakthrough for yourself, while you were doing that coaching training. So you had decided to take the leap, slowly worn down. You decided to try something new. You leave the
Hmm.
military, you retire, and then you start this coaching training, and you come to a revelation or a discovery of yourself. Can you talk about that process from hard assery to, as you describe it, bad assery?
Yeah, man. I I liked how you described the way that it was, and I think that the one thing that really supported me actually in making this transition, out of all things, was becoming an IED disposal operator. To think outside the box, to think in different ways,
Mm-hmm.
non-linear ways, that is. But that's probably another story for another day. the the term transformation, I would never uh, use in the same sentence as change. Change happens with or without us. Transformation, I think, is that thing where you make a choice. You make this choice to do something different, to do something with yourself, to do some inner work. And that's exactly what it was that I found was the magic ingredient in transitioning, was the inner work. And the inner work just was only about vulnerability, really, when it all comes down to it. It's actually looking at all the stories that made me who I was, and all the people who told me how I was supposed to be, and all of the training, and all of the mentors and examples. While all great, it had me in a place where it was limiting my own experience in life, and even limiting, hey, what am I going to do when I leave the military? Because honestly, I really had no idea what I was going to do when I grew up, right? When it comes down to it,
Yeah, yeah.
I had no idea. Yeah, so as as part of that limiting belief, I think one of the things that I needed was to give myself an act of forgiveness for all of the things that I had done, and all the person who I had been, especially with certain people. It was almost like I guess it was almost like a 12-step process in some ways. I haven't done that process, but I've heard about it. I think it's very similar.
Well, the military has a very, I mean, for all of us, if you don't know this, and you don't realize this, take a quick look in the mirror and you'll figure out that the military has a very strong culture. And when you join and you go through basic, it's the beginning of an indoctrination process whereby you adopt a military mindset. And depending on what unit you're in, and where you serve, there's certain niches to that military mindset, and certain elite groups have a very hard-assed, mentality that does not allow for that vulnerability. And clearance diving is one of those, where don't get me wrong, it certainly exists. There are certainly members in that world which have the confidence to have that vulnerable state, but those are typically very seasoned members of that community, and to be successful or coming through, you are not encouraged to have that mentality. In fact, the mindset you described before is the one that's encouraged, where you have the blinders on, focused on all things military career, and you have this hard like these walls set up to protect you, to prevent you from showing vulnerability, to be successful in that environment. But to go through the process that you started to describe, where you start forgiving yourself for perhaps some of the ways that you behave that you maybe didn't feel good about, things that you may have done that you didn't feel proud of, to realize that's okay, and to move on and move forward to a place of, as opposed to the change, which, like you described, that happens all around us. But you're actively taking a role in the change aspect to transform yourself into this new person, or have this new skill set. And in your case, with the coaching training that you did, and the transformation and the vulnerability that you embraced, can you describe how that vulnerability, like what that gave you and how that drove you into the business that you're in now?
Yeah, what I didn't know before was that barrier, that armor, it didn't just keep stuff out, it kept stuff in, or I couldn't even access it. So, and what it did was actually create a mindset of a lie. I mean, that's how I feel about it now, and it's not like I'm looking back at it in huge regret. But when I think about how it is now, it was more about letting go of the stuff that I had learned. So there's a great big unlearning process, and I remember the first day that I was able to forgive myself. I'd given myself permission, really, to forgive myself for all those things, and I think that act of releasing or letting go and just allowing tears to just stream down my face and go, hey, wow, what are these things coming down? At that point, it didn't really matter what kind of job that I was doing, because I was actually experiencing life as a human being, something that I hadn't been doing. And man, I always hate saying this because it could make it sound like I'm making other people wrong, right, for not being vulnerable. But when I learned that, and I was reading something from Brene Brown, the fairly famous shame researcher, and she said that joy was actually the greatest expression of vulnerability. It wasn't sorrow like everybody would probably be led to believe. So, but you can't have that joy without letting everything else. And that part of that was just me letting my walls down. And what I had learned through my transition, a big part of letting the walls down was letting people in, letting my coach in, letting my family in, letting my new tribe in. Letting all those people into my life was not something that I would normally do. I would normally just do it all alone and make it sound like it was easier that way. But letting those people in and creating that tribe, that was the one thing. I couldn't have done any of this without taking the first steps, and I couldn't have done that without having the support of really close friends like James, or I had a whole bunch of coaches calling me at that time saying, hey, like, when are you going to come? when are you going to start this program? And I honestly didn't know how I was going to do it, how I would afford it. I think we can get stuck in the how so incredibly much. Get stuck in the how. How are we going to do it? How am I going to afford it? How am I going to make this work? And then we never make it actually happen. So when I did say yes, and I hit the enter button for the registration and realistically hit enter or the return button to start my new life, I didn't know how. I had let go of just that little bit of fear. And, you know, I find the universe just has a way of letting you know and providing that thing for you. And it was the very next day that I got a check in the mail from Veteran Affairs Canada from an injury that I sustained years earlier, and I put a claim in, and I thought it was dead in the water.
Mm-hmm.
This program that I went off to do, this coaching program, year-long program, it was almost $20,000. And at that point in time, I had no idea how I was going to pay for that. But I just, I just threw my bag over the fence, and I went, okay, now I got to get that. And I went for it. And I think that that's one of the big differences in how I experience fear now, is that I'm going to feel fear regardless if I go for it or if I don't. Let me explain a little bit. If I try to figure out the how and how I'm going to do all this stuff, I'm in fear the whole time. I'm going, hey, writing stuff down, making lists and checking off the boxes, and all of it's fear-based, but nothing really gets done. Whereas when I just go for it and I say, hey, this is what I'm going to do, the how will take care of itself, especially when I open myself up to people. I mean, how could I do what I'm doing if I'm not open, vulnerable, if I'm not a badass in my own world? How do I expect people to be a badass in theirs?
It's funny, the mindset you're describing as far as the fear holding you back. In the online space, a lot of folks will refer to that as the mindset of scarcity, and that you're so afraid that you don't have enough time or money or resources, or that you can't do it because you don't have enough energy, or there's so many reasons why it can't. And changing that mindset into one, and to be fair, like a mindset of scarcity is one that, to be fair, is encouraged in the military, because we're always double checking, triple checking, making sure that things are going to be successful, because failure, it has dramatic consequences. So we're always extra careful, and we have a fear of failure, for good reason. However, as part of that, as we are not encouraged to have this kind of attitude of plenty, or this positive mindset where you can go forward and it's okay to fail, and that to know that if you move forward on something, that conditions will present themselves that can, if you take advantage of them, support you in what you're doing. And I mean, Granted, a little bit of a rolling of the dice in your situation. You didn't know that check was in the mail, and then boom, it shows up. But the fact that you'd made a decision to move forward for yourself, as far as this it's not even just a career change, but just like a lifestyle shift in how you're perceiving your life, how you're going to move forward, how you want to help others, and how you want to be helped. And what you describe about this community that you've developed around you because of this training that you've done, the people you've been exposed to, and so on, that it's had such a positive effect in your life. If you look back on that now, what your life was at release versus where you are today, what is the greatest, like if you were to tell somebody who's getting out now, like what is the most positive and wonderful thing about where you are today versus where you were, day one after release?
Oh, living authentically is something that you can't really know until you open up. Because we think that we are until we actually create that. And creating it is something that I think everybody can do. Rolling the dice, so to speak, I know how terrifying that can be. And I was getting a chuckle from what you were saying, because I remember specifically on this one course report that I had received, in the narrative, it had said that I did this well, I did that well, but I had a cavalier attitude.
I've heard that.
And I was like, yes, I know what you mean. It is not, you are not rewarded for having a cavalier attitude or for rolling the dice and going for it. And that's not just in the military. I've talked with probably hundreds of people that are outside of the military structure, and it's still the same thing. Everybody has their own belief system that they create, and when we're in the military, we think we believe that we're incredibly special from everybody else. Like everybody else, man, they could do it so easy, like going from one civilian job to the next, for instance, or going from a civilian job that you don't really love or you're done with, and then actually finding one that you'd love to do, or finding the joy and fulfillment within it. They're the same because everybody has a story. Everybody has a story that defines who they are. When you can identify your story, when you can see it as a story, then I think it creates space to build a new one. Hey, what is my life actually going to be like? So the greatest, to answer your question, sorry, I'm on a tangent. The greatest thing is that I got my smile back. The greatest thing is that I can go out in a beautiful forest like the one in the pictures behind you, and just stand there and take it all in, and all the beauty, and stand there long enough for the animals to start making noise again. To be present with that, because for me, that's the thing. I spent 16 years out on the water all the time, and there are very few times that I can remember when I was super present with just the beauty of it, the beauty of the world. There were times that now I have a choice to actually do that every day.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter who I'm talking to, what I'm doing, I think that's the gift that I most appreciate. Because remember, it's only been like just over 2 years since I left the military. I left in November of 2015. I took that one job at WorkSafe for 4 months before I decided, no, this isn't for me. I'm doing the same thing that I was doing before.
Mm-hmm.
And saying that, thinking about people who are still in the military and they're just leaving, is that if I had advice, don't be afraid to try something. I went there for 4 months and I felt like I felt so bad for leaving. I went to my manager and I said, this isn't really for me. And I was going to give them 30 days notice and all this stuff. And she looked at me and she said, how come you're giving me 30 days notice? Why don't you just go? Like, you don't have to stay. I said, really? It was like, I still needed permission from people. There was an authority still, and I needed that authority.
Mm-hmm.
I really did. So there was a transformation of authority where I am the authority now for my life. And I had to let go of that comfort of having somebody else operating for me, And I'll never forget that experience in that office that day with my manager, because she just looked at me and she said, I see you doing bigger things. I said, yeah. You know what I mean? Maybe not bigger things, but different things.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
But having that initial transition from wearing a uniform into wearing civilians, and just co-mingling with civilians was a great opportunity. Having lunch with people who didn't serve the whole career in the military, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that anybody can do. You can go in and call somebody from your kids' hockey team or soccer team or rugby team or whatever, and say, hey, let's go for lunch, and just start getting to know your community. That's another big thing that I've really taken on, is getting to know my community. I've been up in Cowichan Valley on Vancouver Island since 2001. It wasn't till almost 2016 that I started to really get to know people. I had friends here small group of friends. But now when I go out, I see somebody every day. So getting a sense of that community and that like, these are things that have been around for millennia. We know these things. You got to build your tribe. You have to be a part of community. You have to open up and ask for help and support. And I just see what I do now as one little piece of that whole puzzle. But getting that fresh perspective on what you really want out of life, that's the thing that keeps me going, is that I know it's clear. And whatever I choose to do along the way, whatever business I create, because I know I'll never work for anybody again. That's for sure. But whatever that is, I know that it's full of adventure, freedom, joy, happiness, love. Those are the ingredients to my life. And whatever that I do, it's that's part of it. Hands down.
For everyone who's watching, if you're a military member and you're about to go through this transition process, you're thinking about retiring, or you're in the process of release now, and or you're on the other side of it, and you haven't gone through this process being that, as Wade described, you've been in this mindset where you've given agency to somebody else, the authority to somebody else, which was the organization, in our case, the RCN, to sort of like run your life and tell you what you can and can't do. I always love leave passes, because it's like, you cannot take your vacation on this day. You can only take it on the days that are authorized in the leave pass, and you can only go within this certain geographic bubble. It's hilarious. But that's an example, like the agency, the authority to be able to take back your own life. Because whether you want it or not, when you transition out and you go into the civilian workspace, all of a sudden, as a person out there looking for a job, you have agency. It's on you to find a job, find the next thing that you want to do. Maybe you don't want to work take up another career. Maybe you only want to work a part-time job or a 9-to-5 or whatever it is you want to do. But you have to take and give yourself the permission to go through the process of finding what that is. And maybe it's like Wade described, leaving his military occupation and going into another job that was, almost exactly the same, using a lot of the same skill sets, but realizing after you were there for a while, that's not what I want to do. There's lots of examples of people who do that, where they basically sidestep into a government job or another job that mirrors what they were doing in the military. But maybe that's not what you want to do. Maybe it is, but maybe not. This is a great opportunity for you to find something else, for you to take that leap, take that jump. And if you weren't happy, or you aren't happy in your life currently, finding something that will make you happy and, give you that sense of reward, that sense of joy, so that you can, stand in the forest, not that it's, perhaps the cloudy, fluffy image is too much for you right now. That's okay. You'll get there. You'll be able to stay in the forest and be like, yes, I can appreciate the beauty of this place right now. And then paintball goes by you and you get back into the game. But you enjoy it. And so, for example, Wade, in your case right now, you are now a former hard-ass clearance diver, now a badass business coach. And as far as your transition into this coaching world, so that it's less fluffy for everybody, can you define for us today, professionally, what it is that you do and where we can reach you and get a hold of you for it?
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for bringing it back. I forget that there's a gradient to transformation. And if I think back a couple of years ago, or a few years ago, I would have been probably in the same position, going, "Oh yeah, it's not possible." Yeah. And that's really what it comes down to. As a coach, I work, I do personal and professional leadership coaching, I call it. Business coaching is a part of it, But when I say leadership coaching, it's what you were describing and we were talking about earlier as the authority, taking charge of your life in all aspects, your relationships, your business, whatever it is. So personal and professional leadership coaching. You can use the website down below there, www.brissonscoaching.com. You can also email me at wade@brissonscoaching.com, and we can set up a time to chat. Part of my business structure is that I meet with all kinds of people, either virtually or in person. So virtually on the computer, on the phone. If it's local, then I can meet in person as well. And talking about what you want out of life is normally the first conversation that we have. I mean, what you really want, and letting go of how it's supposed to be is probably one of the things that will happen. Just to create an image of what that is, and once you can create that, and then we can build on it, and building on that together provides structure. It provides a way forward. It's not just loosey-goosey coach this week on something and that week on something. There's an intention to everything. And setting an intention, like that's been around for thousands of years as a way of making progress. So setting an intention of what you want to do and who you want to be through coaching, you get to shift both. You get to shift how you're being, how you're showing up in the world. Do you show up with a frown or do you show up with a smile? And I assert that it's not that easy as just saying, turn that frown upside down. That's not really effective. There's a transformation to it. That's what I'm saying. And, having the intention, it will be scary. So getting to know your fears exactly. And they're the deep fears. They're not the fears of, falling and of Bigfoot or whatever you're scared of, those kinds of things. They're actually real fears that you've had for your entire life. Like, what are people going to think of me? This is a really great example, this conversation we're having right now. Like, some people are going to think this is all fluffy and, or whatever. So I can't have this conversation if I have a fear of what people will think about me, which I do. All right. But I know about it. So creating the awareness, it gives choice.
What you just said there is telling. So we talk about fear and we talk about courage. And if you don't realize what courage is, it's the ability to be able to face your fears. So Wade just talked about how he does have a fear of people judging him, and yet comes on a program like this, has an occupation like he does, after having the history that he has, knowing that there are many of us out there who may judge him on what he does. But I told you at the beginning of the episode that this episode was about giving you tactics for success. And like Wade said, you can set, your course to second star to the right and straight on till morning. But this and what Wade offers can provide you a clear and concrete plan on how to get to that second star to the right, to set that new vision, that new mission for yourself. You all know SMESC, so we know the situation. The situation is you are either out or you are on your way to getting out. The mission is for you to be successful on the other side. The execution is where Wade comes in. He will come in, set down a structure, a plan for you to be successful, and then it's up to you to get it done. I know you have the energy, I know you have the drive, because I've been where you are and I know what you can do. And with Wade's help, all you have to do is apply that focus, that energy, and that direction into what you want to be successful in, the mission of being successful in your transition on the other side, and we'll get it done. So Wade, thank you so much for coming on the show, for sharing and being vulnerable, as you say, strength through vulnerability, and sharing with us and being of service to our mutual community.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Well, everybody, as I finger fumble on my end here, I just want to there we go. Just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This episode today is special and important because the first couple episodes we talked about some situational stuff that's going on, maybe some tools and resources that are available to you. But this is getting down to the nitty gritty of how are you going to be successful? How are you going to be successful in that transition, getting to the other side and being happy, content, and successful? I keep using that word, but to make sure that you're not fumbling, that you're not directionless, that you're not drifting at sea, using a Navy metaphor. Because Wade, we all want you to be happy and successful in your transition, so that you can live the rest of your life with joy, as we talked about before. Having happiness in your life. So a little touchy-feely end of the show. Nonetheless, thanks again for Wade for being on the show with us today. This is Getting to Hired. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching today's episode of Getting to Hired. If you found today's episode useful or know another veteran who would find it useful, then make sure to tell 2 friends. Share this video on Facebook and hit the follow button so that you're up to date on the latest live streams as they go live on Facebook Live. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, then make sure that you subscribe and hit the bell button so that you're up to date on when new content hits our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.